Hi everybody and welcome to the Creative Kindergarten YouTube channel. My name is Amanda and I'm an early childhood educator in Ontario, Canada. I get asked a lot of questions about kindergarten centers. Educators come to me with all of their big questions about like how they're set up, how do I run them, how do I set up those rules and routines around centers, what do I use, and all those kinds of like big questions that educators have, especially when they're just starting out in kindergarten. So I thought I would make a YouTube channel just kind of going over what I do in my classroom, how I set up my students for success in September so that, my job gets easier as the school year goes on because, it's the same rules and expectations every day when students come to class. And so this YouTube channel is just going to be, this YouTube video is just going to be answering all of those big questions that you have. If you have any other questions, make sure you leave them in the comments. Maybe that's a future, YouTube video. Maybe that is something that I can answer in the comments for you, but I'm here. I always answer any messages that are sent there. You can also follow me over on Instagram. I share lots of my ideas there. So I'm always here to answer any of those big questions that you might have, but these are the questions that I get asked like most regularly. And so I thought one big YouTube video would be the way to answer all these great questions that educators have and want to, be successful in the kindergarten classroom. The first one that I get asked probably the most is how I run centers. So what does that look like in the classroom? Do students just get to go where they want to? Is it timed? Do you call students by groups? Do you have groups of students that have to move together through centers? And the basic answer to all that is I do free choice centers, or what I call free choice centers. There is no timer, there are no groups, there is nothing. Students get to pick where they want to go, how long they stay there, and when they want to move. We try to incorporate big blocks of time where students are able to do this, anywhere between like 40 minutes to an hour, where students are able just to free flow, do what they want to do. And not saying that there's never like a must do center that they have to do. Usually this is something that I've planned to do with small groups of students where, I'm targeting specific skills for those students. It's not saying that small groups aren't happening. There's not sometimes a kid that I have to call over to do a certain specific center. But for the most part, students just get to pick where they want to go. They get up at the end of our morning meeting and I say, go to where you want to go to, and they get to go and they get to stay there a long time. Is there ever any problems? Of course, in any kindergarten classroom, there's going to be problems where students don't want to go to a center. And the one rule is like, if there's no chair at a table, it's full, you can't go there. And so a lot of the times students will be like, oh, I want to go to that center, but there's no more chairs. My best answer for that is everybody will get a turn to go to that center if it needs to stay out for 3 days. So everybody gets a turn to play with those materials, to do that activity, whatever it might be. It'll stay out for 3 days. You will get a turn at some point to do that table. Don't worry about it. And I say, let them know when they're done, whoever's at that table, if they could come let you know so that you can have a turn. After a while, it stops being a problem because students know that whatever they want to do, they'll get a chance to do it. So it's not like they're not telling me that they want to go there. Of course, they still have to tell me because or else I have no idea who wants to go there. But they'll say things like, oh, I really want to, have a turn going to the magnet tiles and I haven't had a turn. And I'll say, great. I'll keep an eye out. When there's space, you can go. If you don't get a chance to do today, we'll have it out tomorrow. And so it kind of builds that like relationships with my students so that they understand that, they will have a turn. They build that trust like, oh, just because I don't have it right now doesn't mean I'll never have a turn. And that relationship builds over the school year to the point that that doesn't become a problem as the school year progresses. And it kind of eliminates, those arguments or those feelings of missing out and all that kind of stuff because students know they'll get a chance to go there eventually. It just, we can't have too many students at a table. First of all, we don't have enough materials for 30 kids to be at a table at once. So, we just don't have enough materials for that to happen. So that's how we regulate how many kids can be at a center. If there's a chair, you can be there. If there's no chair, you can't be there. For things like the sensory bin, especially with COVID, we had to limit the amount of kids that were allowed at certain areas like the dramatic play and the sensory bin and all that kind of stuff. And again, it was like, this is going to be open all day, every day. So you don't have to worry about missing out because you will get a chance to be there. So yeah, free choice centers all the way. I also get asked a lot, do you ever have students that just never want to go to a writing center? Of course, there's some kids that don't want to do a writing center, and that's okay. What happens is that those students that don't necessarily pick writing centers all the time, that I'll make sure they're included in my small group writing center. So there are some times where when I'm explaining centers to students, I'll be like, this is going to be a must do center. Everybody's going to have to come here eventually. And so I'll start with the kids that want to do that center. So let's say we're doing some kind of a writing activity that I'm focusing on a certain skill with each student in the writing process. If it's finger spaces, lowercase letters, stretching out words, beginning sounds, whatever it might be. So we might be focusing on that for a small group at a writing center. I'll start with the kids that, want to be there. There might be something that has caught the attention of another child, and they don't necessarily want to start at the writing center because they really want to go do the art activity. Like the art activity is calling to them, they want to go there. That's fine. I'm not going to force them to come to the writing center when there's something that's really pulling their attention away. I'm not going to get the best writing out of them then anyways. So I'll go through all the kids that are eager to do writing. We always have that group of kids that want to do the writing, that are eager to do it. And then as students trickle out of the writing center and I have to call more students in, what I'll do is I'll keep an eye out for any student that's leaving a center, and I'll say, hey, Charlie, I don't have a kid named Charlie, I'm making up names. Hey, Charlie, do you want to come over here and do the writing center? And maybe he'll say, sure. And he comes on over. Or maybe he'll say, I'm really looking forward to playing the Play-Doh. And I'll say, okay, great. When you're done with Play-Doh, can you come do some writing? And usually it's a yes. I don't know if I've ever gone into a power struggle over this. Usually writing centers last like 2 or 3 days. So it might be the next day when I'm introducing centers, I might say, oh, if you haven't done the writing center, today is going to be the day that you have to do the writing center. So put that in the back of your mind. If there's something else you really want to start off with, that's great. At some point today, you will have to come and do the writing. So it kind of preps them so that they know that this is something that they're going to have to take a break from something else to come and do. I think it's important to still do your small groups even through Free Choice Center, because you really want to get to all of those skills that students need to be successful. I'm using writing as an example. This could be for anything. This could be for some kind of math activity. It could be an art activity. It could be anything, really. Anything that you're going to be needing to do in small groups, or that you need to assess learning for, or whatever it might be. I'm just using writing as an example because it was easy for me to pull off the top of my head. So yeah, I still pull students. There are still must-do centers, but for the most part, students just get to pick where they want to go. And again, that builds that trust that even though there is a must-do center, they know that if they miss out on something right now, they'll be able to go back to it at another time. If they tell me like, oh, I know I have to come do writing, but I really wanted to play with Play-Doh today, I'll be like, oh, fantastic. Thank you for letting me know. If we don't have time to go back to Play-Doh after writing today, I'll make sure that's out for you tomorrow. Or I'll make sure that's out for you in the afternoon, or I'll make sure there's a space for you. Whatever it might be, I reassure them that what they want to do is very important and I'm taking it seriously, but also they know to take what I'm asking them to do seriously as well. So it kind of goes that both ways, where we're building that relationship, we're building that trust with that student so that they're not arguing with you to come do an activity. Very minimal arguments happen, and if they're really adamant that they don't want to come do something, again, I'm not going to get their best work anyways, so I don't engage in that power struggle. That's not the hill I want to die on. I say okay, and then maybe there's just another time in the day when I can pull them for that small group, and that's okay. These kids in our kindergarten classroom are like 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, some depending on where we are in the school year, and that's developmentally okay for students to not want to be pulled away from something they really want to do, to come do something that maybe as an educator is important, but to them doesn't hold the highest importance. So that's kind of how Free Choice Centers and small groups work in my classroom. I'm not saying that this is the only way it works in other classrooms, but for me, Free Choice Centers, I don't have to keep track of timers. I don't have to keep track of groups. I don't have to make sure they're rotating on time. There's no arguing. It's just easy. And when there's a supply that comes in, or there's a prep teacher that comes in, it's just easy because kids just know the routine and they just keep going, and we don't have to interrupt their learning or interrupt anything, because they're just able to just free flow and do what they need to do. And I'm telling you, after the first week or two of explaining Free Choice Centers to students, it doesn't become a problem anymore. There are those students that want to stay in blocks forever, but naturally, like they'll have to go try something else at some point. So if the first month of school, all they want to do is play with blocks, they want to play with blocks, and that's okay. They're learning lots while playing with blocks. They're using their social skills, their problem solving skills. It doesn't mean I never say to them, hey, can you come over and practice writing your name with me? I'd love to see you practice writing your name with me. And I said, and then I'll say, then you can go back to playing with blocks afterwards. And usually they're really like, I've never had a kid argue with me if I say like, you'll be able to go back, don't worry about it. They'll never argue with me about that. So yeah, it's just, it's that power struggle, and that you don't want to engage in that power struggle. You just kind of want to reassure them and build that relationship and that trust between educator and student, so that they know that they'll always get a chance to go back to what they want to do. All right, the next question I get asked a lot is, how often do I change out centers? And so a lot of my Instagram stories over this past year, I would go to class early. I like being at school early before a lot of other people get there. I like the calm and quiet while I'm setting up for the day. And I would set up centers, and then I would do like a quick video showcasing the centers and tabletop activities that we're doing for that day. And I would often get asked, like, how often do you change these centers? And that really, it depends. That's what I'm just gonna say. So the tabletop centers are usually a mix. Usually we have some kind of activity that'll need more guidance. So either a writing activity, a math activity, something that will need more educator guidance. And then the rest of them, we try to make them pretty independent in the classroom. My teaching partner and I, there's 2 of us in the classroom. We try to make them pretty independent so that we can really focus on that small group that we're doing. At the end of the school year, just randomly, one of our parents bought us this sewing kit of dinosaurs, and I don't know if they realized this when they bought it for us, but like you have to like thread a needle and use thread to actually sew the 2 pieces of felt together for the dinosaurs, and then stuff them, and then add like the embellishments on top of it to make it look like a dinosaur. Everything was already cut out, but the students had to sew. It sounds like a great idea, but students don't know how to thread a needle. It was very difficult for even myself to thread this needle. The hole was very small. And, you know, you have to teach kids how to sew. Most kids don't know how to sew. And so this became our small group for, I'm going to say, 4-5 days. I sat with kids and taught them how to sew. They loved it. It was one of the best bonding activities that I've done with my students all year. It just happened to be like the last week of school that this happened. And so I sat with them for at least 4 days. I'm assuming it was at least 4 days. I sat with them for most of the day sewing dinosaurs. The rest of the tables had to be pretty independent because I was just stuck at a table threading needles and teaching kids how to sew. The fine motor skills, the problem solving skills, the perseverance skills that were taught through this one activity were amazing, but it did take me away from other activities, and that was perfectly okay because the other activities we set up were independent. So when we're planning these centers, we're thinking about that. And we're also thinking about, you know, how are we going to make sure that the other centers are keeping our students' attention span so that they're not just wandering around the classroom looking for something to do. So keeping that in mind, when I'm talking about how often we keep things, we kind of rotate out of things. So even though, you know, I'm setting up Lego on a table, Lego might not be out like 3 days in a row because we don't want them to not get bored of Lego, but like to be done with Lego. Instead, we let them, you know, we usually have one table of building materials. So Lego will be out one day, Magna-Tiles will be out another day, linking logs will be out another day, and we'll kind of rotate through what kind of building material is at a table. Foam blocks, Duplo. So the different building materials that we have might rotate out on that table, but we'll reuse them all year. Play-Doh might be at a table. Again, we won't put out Play-Doh every day, but we will at least have it out once a week. So those kind of centers, even though we're changing them daily, are not like new centers that we're setting out. They're just like centers that we rotate through on a regular basis. For activities that are more guided, like a writing activity, that might be out for 2-3 days. It just depends how long it takes all my students to go through it. Other activities that might be, you know, letter practice, like driving on letters or building letters with Duplo blocks or some kind of sight word activity. Those kind of activities could be changed daily. We kind of keep an eye out on how interested students are with an activity, and we kind of gauge if that needs to be out for a second day, or we just take it, like we change it out for the next day. So it's really just paying attention to what your students are liking and what they're interested in, and if we need to change anything. So that, I don't know if that really answers the question, but it's really just dependent on your students how long an activity stays out for. So we put out activities in the morning, and those same activities stay out all day. So we have a big block of time in the morning and a big block of time in the afternoon, 40 minutes to an hour, where students can engage in tabletop activities. And so after almost 2 hours, what activities are they interested in still? What activities do they need to finish? Is there anything else that we need to change out? Any materials we need to change out? And then we plan for the next day using that kind of like thought process. There might be a finishing table where there might be like a few activities that students were really interested in, but only a couple of students haven't done them. So I might consolidate that into one, like we call it our finishing table, where, you know, there might be a writing activity and a letter activity that students just didn't all get a chance to do. And so we might put it all together at a finishing table. Summarize. Usually centers are put out for 1 day. Writing centers are usually 2 days. And then a lot of the activities that we put out are ones that are reused throughout the school year, so we're not reinventing the wheel every single day. And then we assess at the end of the day whether or not we need to have any of the activities out for a second day. And if not, then the next day we have all new sets of activities. So we change them out on the daily with like an asterisk of some things might need to be changed, might need to go for a second day. I hope that answers that question. Again, I'm in the comments if anybody has any other questions. We reuse a lot of activities throughout the school year. So it's not like we have 6 tables. It's not like we're coming up with 6 new activities every day for the students to do. A lot of the stuff that we do is reused throughout the school year. Another question that I get asked a lot is around planning for these centers. So I kind of touched on it a little bit, but my teaching partner and I, we plan centers together. At the beginning of the year, because we had a new partnership last year, this was very, I don't want to say regulated, not regulated. It was very scheduled how we would plan. Like we would say, okay, we're going to plan before school on this day or after school or during lunch, whatever. We had like a kind of schedule of how we were going to, of when we were going to plan together. As the school year went on and we got to know each other, we kind of went into a routine with our students. That didn't happen as much anymore. Instead, when we thought of an idea or we knew something had to get done or whatever it might be, we would just scribble it into our day plan. We had a paper day plan where literally it was just like every day had 6 lines for each of the tabletop centers, and we would just write in what we would want to put on each of the tabletop centers. Not saying that we're both very open to, if you have another idea or you think this needs to change, we could like cross it out and put something else. We were both very open to that happening. So we had the great relationship where we would just be like, oh, I have this great idea. I just heard these kids talking about this. I think we should put out this. Or, oh, I just thought that I just remember that we have to get this done with the students this week. So can we put this in here? Like, it was a very free flow planning process. Even the morning of, if I was setting something up and I was like, oh, we don't have the material for this. Oh, this isn't working. Oh, I don't know if the kids are going to like this. Even the morning of, even if it was written in the day plan, you can just change it out. So at the beginning of the school year, very scheduled, very much like, oh, we should plan after school on Friday for next week, or we should plan during lunch, whatever it might be. And it became much more free flowing as this school year went on, where we were just writing things into the day plan as we thought of them and just like getting it done. If you are a type personality like I am, this can be kind of challenging, and you have to kind of get used to just being more on the fly, because at least our Ontario kindergarten program, the play-based, inquiry-based learning that's happening, things change like this. And you have to be able to follow the flow of what your students are interested in and what you think your students will be interested in. And so changing day plans and planning becomes much more fluid than it would be maybe in other grades or, you know, in other places I don't know, in the States or something like that, where they don't have that kind of open curriculum that we have in Ontario. So yeah, it's really free flowing, and we're not too stressed about it. And we just kind of go and follow the needs of our students. And there's very few times where we're like, we have to get this done. But there's just sometimes where there's things you have to get done. And that's okay as well. And you work within those confines. But planning, again, you just, especially when it's two people, you have to find the time to do it together. Whether that be on Friday, you have no guided activities and everything is like, they just get to do whatever they want, and you get to kind of sit back and plan together. Maybe that happens in a Friday afternoon or like a morning at some point, whatever it might be. It might be coming in a little bit early on a certain day or leaving a little bit later on a certain day. But I've always tried to just make it work with my teaching partner, and it does get easier as the year goes on if you have that very open and relationship and open communication with your teaching partner. If you're by yourself, you just have to set aside time and just start planning. And again, it gets easier as the school year goes on. And I think the key to that is having materials that are reusable, that you can use all year, so that there's always a table or 2 or 3 that are just materials, that this open-ended materials that the students know how to use. Straws and connectors, Lego, Magna-Tiles, foam blocks, I'm trying to think of anything else, Play-Doh. There's like some great resources out there that there's alphabet construction that I love as well. All of those things that you can just kind of like have in a bin and just set out, and the students are so open in that the students can create whatever they want with them. Sometimes I do add provocations to those if that's something that we want to do. Or sometimes it's just, I grab the bin, it goes on the table, and we're done. The kids get to just play with the materials. They're open-ended, and it works on their fine motor skills, their social skills, their problem-solving skills. It works on a variety of skills, but not something that you necessarily have to be overseeing or planning too much for. So having those open-ended materials is kind of like the basis, and then you can kind of plan the rest of your tabletop centers or your rest of your like guided centers, knowing that, those centers you won't have to be at. So thinking about it that way. The next question I get asked a lot is around the math and literacy centers versus play centers. And I'm putting play in quotation marks because there's a reason for that. And so I get asked a lot like, oh, do you have a certain time when kids are just allowed to play and a certain time where there's more learning centers happening? And my answer to that is always, play is learning for children. So in a play-based, inquiry-based program, play is learning for our students, and I do not separate the two. Math and literacy are not separate. They happen together throughout our school day. We don't have a separate literacy time, a separate math time, and a separate play time. Everything happens throughout the day during free choice centers. So the literacy centers might be something like a writing. I keep coming back to writing center. That's what's in my mind. At the beginning of the school year, it might be practice writing names. Let's say that's the literacy center. It might be practicing names. And then for math, we might be practicing how to represent numbers 1 to 10 with loose parts at a different table. Those are all happening at the same time as what people or educators have called more traditionally like play centers, and those are more the open-ended materials that we have in the classroom. They're still learning at those open-ended materials. They're still learning while they're playing at Lego. They're learning some really great skills while they're playing with Lego. Just the social skills, the fine motor skills that are happening at, like, for them to be able to write their name, they need those fine motor skills that they're developing while they're playing with Lego. They're developing all those social skills and the problem solving skills that happen when they're playing with Lego, and they're, talking with their friends. Oh, they really want that red piece. How can they negotiate having those pieces? How can they build together? We got really great at building together when we had Magna-Tiles in my classroom. There was only, I don't even know how many pieces came in the set. Let's say 100 pieces came in the set of Magna-Tiles that I got. But 100 pieces divided by the 6 kids are at that table, if you only have like a certain number of pieces, you can't build something. And we had this conversation with my students. Like, if everybody just takes a certain number of pieces and builds, you're gonna have a really small structure. If you work together with a group of students and you have more pieces, you can build something pretty amazing if you work together. So the more people working together, the bigger your structure can be. Whereas if you're working by yourself, you're gonna have a fewer number of pieces to work with, and you're not gonna be able to create what you want to create. So negotiating those relationships, and by the end of the year, our students were making amazing creations, working in big groups of like 5 or 6 kids together, which is amazing. Did that start off that way? No. But all of those skills that they were building at the beginning of the school year, using those open-ended materials, led to some amazing things at the end of the school year. So the learning that is taking place during play centers, again, I'm putting that in quotes, during play centers, is just as important as the skills I am teaching them while I'm teaching them how to write their name or how to write a sentence. For me, they're not unequal. Whereas, not saying that I didn't teach them. We had these conversations and we had teaching around working together as a group at the Magnet Tiles, but it doesn't take as much like teacher input for that. Whereas, proper letter formations takes a lot more teacher input. So I think it's more of a distinction between the guided, more teacher-led centers versus the more open-ended child-led centers. And those do happen at the same time. And we have, again, students are able to just pick where they want to go. With an asterisk that sometimes I do call them over to do some guided groups. We also have the dramatic play open. We have cars and building at the floor open. We have a sensory bin, an art easel, and anything else. We might have a coding, like a robot for coding at the floor. There might be a collaborative art project on the floor. There might be like different centers that are open that are not just at the table, that are other spaces within their classroom, and those are open all day just like their tabletop centers are. So there is no distinction between math time, literacy time, and playtime. Everything happens all together and children just free flow and pick where they want to go. And there is no emphasis put on, more traditional academic skills versus, play skills that might be developing. So, yeah, that's usually my answer. That was a much longer answer than I usually give, but that is my answer to, when do I have playtime versus learning time, which there is no distinction between those two for me. All right, and then the last question I get asked the most is, how do I introduce centers to my students? And this is probably the question that is harder to explain just because you would have to like be there for it. So that's why I thought a YouTube video would be perfect for this, because I'll be able to explain it. So we do our morning meeting. Our kids come in, we do our morning meeting. So this might be any kind of literacy skill that I'm working on with my students, whether it be a phonics skill or a phonological awareness skill, whatever it might be, writing skill. We have our morning meeting happening. So we do our morning meeting, and then at the end of our morning meeting, we say, okay, now we're going to explain what's happening at tables before you get a chance to go wherever you want to go. This gets a lot easier as the school year goes on, as students get to know different activities, because again, we reuse activities throughout the school year. So, explaining the centers gets a lot quicker as the school year goes on. We try to keep it short and simple. So usually I'll say like, okay, over at this table, we have Lego. You guys know what to do at Lego. And then we say, okay, over here, we have an art activity. I have a flower. I'm making this up because I can't remember, but I have a flower over here and we have some paint. You get to paint whatever you want over here. Use the flower as your inspiration. And I always give them like please write your name on the back of the paper. Please make sure you write your name. So the kids know that I'll say like, first, what do we need to do? And they'll all say, write your name. And then I say, okay. And then we can use the paint to paint a picture of a flower and say, when you're done, put it in the art easel. Then I'll say, okay, next over here. And then I'll go to the next table. I'm moving through the classroom as I'm explaining it to hold up the materials for our students to see. I'll say, okay, over here, we're doing our sight word book for that's the sight word we're learning this week. And so I'll put a picture of what I'm talking about so you guys have any kind of clue what I'm saying. But the first time I'm introducing this center, I'm saying, okay, you come over here, and I'll hold up the piece of paper and I'll say, you are going to write our name. And then we are going to trace the word is, and then we're going to write the word is. And now we're going to be able to color the pictures, and I'll put it into a book for you. And then I'll make the kids read the book to me once they're done. But the first time I'm explaining, I might have to like put it underneath our projector so that the students can see what I'm talking about and like show them what to do. But by the time they've done it 2 or 3 times, because we do a sight word book every week, I don't have to explain it anymore. I'll just hold it up and I'll say, oh, what sight word did we learn this week? And we'll read it together. And I'll say, okay, over here, you're completing your sight word book for was, and then I'll move on. And that's, again, the positive thing about reusing centers all year is that you can just like quickly explain it. If there is a new activity that the students have never seen before, this is when I'll pause and I'll say, okay, now I'm going to explain what we're doing over here. And sometimes, again, I'll put it underneath the projector if it's something that they need to see, or if it's something that I can act out with another student. Like if it's a game, I'll play around with another student to show them. But I kind of just go through explanations of each center. And if it's a center that like I explain it and I say, okay, this is a little bit complicated, there's a lot of pieces, or it's a game that takes a lot of steps, or whatever it might be, I'll say, I'll be over here helping you guys at this center if you want to come over here. And then once you kind of explain it to a few of the students, they'll be able to explain it to the next set of students that come over to that center. So at the end, so the short explanation of how do I explain centers to my students, at the end of morning meeting, we go through and we explain what is at each of the tables. And then we just let students explore. If they have questions, we always tell them, if you don't know what to do somewhere, or if you have questions about what to do with something, just ask. If it's a material you don't know how to use, just ask. That's what we're here for. And they know that they can go explore the sensory bin, the dramatic play, and all those other places, and they don't have to ask to go there. So we just let them free flow and go and explore, and we kind of keep an eye out, especially in the first like 5 minutes, to see if like maybe we didn't explain a center properly or something like that. And so they know what to do. If it's something like brand new, let's say we're learning about directional coding, and so I have a coding activity out for students to use, I might just, have an explanation maybe the day before about coding. Maybe we'll do a whole group coding activity, and then they'll be able to practice coding by themselves at a table. Maybe that morning meeting is going to be around coding skills, and I incorporate that into my morning meeting so that when they go there, they have an idea of what I'm asking of them. You kind of just have to play around with how you're introducing certain concepts to students and how they're going to practice those concepts at tables, and then just like incorporate it into your whole group lessons as well. That also makes your life a little bit easier when it comes to doing that kind of stuff. All right, I hope that answered all your questions about centers in kindergarten and how I run them, what they look like in iClassroom, and all those kinds of stuff. If you're looking for ideas, I have put together a monthly list of ideas of things that I have done in my classroom. Here's a list. This is just a cover page, and I've broken it down by month and then by week. This is by no means a scope and sequence or anything like that. It's just an idea list of certain things that I've done that month that my students loved and that met the needs of my students. So every month is a different color. So this is for week 3 in September, and I've attached pictures of what the different activities and tabletop centers look like in the classroom. This is only for tabletop centers. Of course, other things are open, again, like dramatic play, building center, all those kinds of things. And then each of the pictures is linked to either resources, blog posts, the product itself, whatever it might be. I've linked everything in this product. So if you're looking for ways to plan for centers in your kindergarten classroom, like this is like the ultimate resource for you. I think it's 70, oh, this is upside down. I think it's 79 pages or something ridiculous, and it is free. I will put the link for it in the description of this video. You can just go and download this for free today. I've linked everything that I possibly could in this resource. I truly loved putting it together because I got a chance to look back on all the amazing things that we did this past year. And yeah, so it's just basically a year-long ideas for your kindergarten classroom. Please don't follow exactly what that is, because that again was following the needs of my students through assessment and through listening to what they were interested in and the inquiry lens that we took in our classroom. So you probably should not copy and paste this into your classroom, but it does give you those ideas. You're not reinventing the wheel every time you go to plan your tabletop centers for that week. And I want to thank you so much for joining me for this YouTube video. I will put the links in the description for, where you can find my blog with even more ideas, my Instagram where I share lots of ideas every day. Basically, I'm in my Instagram showing off what we're doing in the classroom. I will put a link to my podcast where I also talk about different kindergarten topics. I'm also in the comments for you. If you have any other questions, please make sure you leave me a comment. Let me know, do you agree or disagree with all of the different ways that we run centers in my classroom? And I want to thank you so much for joining me and sticking with me till the end. And yeah, I hope you have a great day. Bye.